The morning air was cold and sharp as Kale stepped into the ruined temple at the edge of the frozen lake. The ground was cracked, and vines crept over broken stone walls. Mist hung low, swirling around tall pillars that had once held great power. Brenna and a small group of warriors followed quietly behind. The forgotten, the free humans, moved with careful steps, as if the ruins themselves were watching. Kale's breath came out in white clouds. In his hand he held the worn map, the one that promised to lead him to the heart of Dern. It was more than a story now. He could feel it. The temple door stood before them, huge and carved with symbols that glowed faintly under his touch. The magic was old, different from the elves' spells, raw, wild. Kale took a deep breath and pushed it open. Inside, darkness swallowed them. The only sound was the soft drip of water and their footsteps on cracked stone. The map led them to a great chamber. At its center was a stone pedestal holding a glowing crystal, pulsing softly like a heartbeat, the heart of Dern. Kale stepped forward, eyes wide. The crystal's light bathed the room in blue and gold. It was beautiful and dangerous. Suddenly, the ground shook, stone cracked. From the shadows, traps sprung to life. Blades swung from hidden slots. Walls shifted, closing like jaws. Kale's heart pounded, but his mind stayed sharp. He remembered the lessons from the forgotten. They taught him to watch, to think, to move like water. He ducked under a swinging blade, rolled through a spray of arrows, and used a loose stone to block a crushing wall. Step by careful step, he moved closer to the crystal. Finally, he reached out. His fingers brushed the surface, and a surge of heat shot through his chest. The crystal glowed brighter, sending waves of power into him. Pain and strength mixed inside Kale. Images flashed in his mind. Battles lost and won, cities rising and falling, and a future not yet written. The heart of Dern was not magic to control others. It was a power to understand, to see paths hidden to most. Kale stood taller. The crystal's light settled into his chest, a quiet fire burning beneath his skin. The chamber calmed. The traps fell silent. Brenna and the warriors came forward, eyes wide with awe. "You did it," Brenna said softly. "You're more than a fighter now. You are a leader." Kale looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly, but his heart was steady. "I am not a god," he said, "but I am human, and this power is ours to claim." Outside, the frozen lake shimmered under the rising sun. A new day was beginning for Kale, for the forgotten, and for all humans who dreamed of freedom. The fires burned bright in the night, casting long shadows over the crowded human camps. Kale stood on a low hill, looking down at the hundreds of faces staring back at him, men, women, and children who had known only pain and chains. Now they saw something new, hope. Kale felt the weight of the heart of Dern deep inside his chest, like a steady drumbeat. It gave him strength, but more than that, it gave him clarity. He saw the future like threads weaving through the dark. The elves had power, magic, fine swords, but they were proud, slow to change. Humans had something else, cunning, fire in their veins, the will to fight, not just with swords, but with brains. "We will not win by strength alone," Kale told the crowd. "We will win because we are clever, because we fight for a future the elves can't imagine." The crowd cheered. That night, Kale's small band moved like shadows through the forests near the Elven supply routes. They set traps in narrow passes, hidden pits, nets, and false trails. Elven patrols vanished without a sound. Supplies disappeared. The elves were confused. Their magic could not find the humans who used the trees and stones as weapons. Lerae, the elf who had helped Kale in the library, slipped quietly through the Elven city. She brought news and warnings. Her loyalty was a secret, but her heart was with the rebellion. One night, Kale gathered his leaders around a fire. Maps lay spread on the ground, marked with symbols and notes. "We strike here," Kale said, pointing to a narrow bridge over the River Velen. "If we cut the supplies, the elves will be forced to come to us." Brenna nodded. We can use the terrain. The river is fast. The elves will not expect an ambush. Kale smiled. Exactly. They'd fight in the open. We fight in the dark. The attack was swift and fierce. Hidden in the trees, Kale's warriors waited as the elven wagons rolled across the bridge. When the signal came, a sharp whistle, the humans sprung from their hiding places. Rocks fell, arrows flew, and the bridge's ropes were cut. The wagons crashed into the river below. Elven soldiers shouted and scrambled, but Kale's fighters melted back into the woods before they could catch them. The elves had their magic, but Kale had the land, the people, and a new kind of power. The news spread like wildfire. The humans were no longer weak. They were a force. Back at camp, Kale raised a new banner, red and gold flames twisting upward. It was the symbol of the Ember King, a name the people had given him in whispers. Larry watched from the shadows, hope shining in her eyes. Kale looked up at the stars. The fight was just beginning. But for the first time, he believed they could win. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of new beginnings. Kale stood on a hill overlooking the city of Loventhil. The glass towers no longer gleamed with cold power but stood quiet, their magic broken. Around him, the humans gathered, tired but smiling. They were no longer slaves or outcasts. They were free. Kale looked at Brenna and Lyre beside him. Both had fought hard, stood strong through every battle. Together, they had led their people from darkness into light. "We did it," Brenna said softly, her eyes shining. "But this is only the start," Kale replied. "Freedom is not just winning a war. It is building a future." Larry nodded. "The elves will have to change. We must show them there is strength in unity, not in ruling by fear." The people began to move into the city, cautious but hopeful. They walked through streets once ruled by cold hands but now open to all. Children played near fountains, and merchants opened their stalls. The city was alive again. Kale carried the heart of Dern, its gentle glow reminding him of the power inside every human, strength not just in magic, but in heart and mind. He thought about the elves who had once looked down on humans as weak. Now the truth was clear. Humans were clever, determined, and brave. The new leaders gathered in the city square. Kale stepped forward, raising his voice so all could hear. "Today, we begin a new chapter," he said. "Elves and humans, once divided by fear and pride, must learn to live as one. We will rebuild, not as enemies but as neighbors." The crowd cheered, hope shining in their eyes. Cerilith appeared, her face no longer cold but thoughtful. She stepped forward and bowed her head to Kale. "You have changed more than the lands," she said. "You have changed hearts. I will help build this new world." Kale smiled. It was the hardest battle that won, the battle to forgive and to trust. The sun rose higher, flooding the city with light. A new dawn had come. The moon hung low over Loventhil, casting pale light on the marble towers. Most elves were asleep. Only the guards moved through the halls, their armor glowing faintly with magic. Kale walked in silence, his footsteps soft as a whisper. He wore a servant's cloak, hood pulled low, and carried a basket of scrolls. Just another human servant. No one looked twice. Inside the basket, beneath the scrolls, was a lockpick made from a fork and a thin glass knife. He had only minutes. Kale slipped into the lower wing of the Grand Library, where the oldest records were kept. No humans were allowed here. But Kale had listened. He had learned the guards' patterns. He had memorized the runes on the doors. He moved quickly down the dark hallway, holding a small crystal to light his path. The doors to the forbidden archives were tall and covered in glowing script. He touched the symbols carefully, one by one, just as he'd seen Cerilith do. The door clicked. Inside, the air was cold and still. The room was filled with stone shelves, scrolls, and dusty books wrapped in chains. Kale moved toward the oldest section. His heart pounded. He didn't have long. He found what he was looking for, a book bound in dark leather, half-rotted. Its title was faded, but he could read one word: Origins. He opened it. Inside were drawings of cities with human banners, weapons not shaped like elven swords, and statues of human kings. His hands trembled. This book told a different story, one the elves never spoke of. Humans were not always weak. They had ruled once, long ago. Then he saw something else. A drawing of a crystal, round, glowing, set in a metal cage. Beneath it, a name: the Heart of Dern. It was said to awaken the true strength of mankind. A sound behind him made him freeze. A voice, soft, sharp. "You shouldn't be here." Cale turned slowly. It was Lyrae, one of Saralit's handmaidens. She was an elf, young by their standards, with silver eyes and a serious face. She didn't raise the alarm. Instead, she stepped forward and looked at the book. "You believe this?" she whispered. "I have to," Cale said. She closed the book gently and looked at him for a long moment. Then she handed it back. "Go. Now." Cale didn't wait. He ran through the shadows, heart racing, the book tucked under his cloak. Later, in his room, he studied the pages again. There was a drawing of a mountain split in two with a frozen lake below it. A mark beside it glowed faintly, magic ink. The elves had tried to erase the path to the Heart of Dern. But not well enough. Cale traced the mark with his finger. If the elves feared this thing, it meant one thing. It was real. And it could change everything. Cale stood still in the center of the stone courtyard, his heart beating like a war drum. All around him, tall elves in silver robes watched from high balconies. Their faces were cold like carved marble. They whispered among themselves, amused. Another human playing at sword games. A joke. A pet. Across from Cale stood Phaler, a young elf noble with golden hair and a proud smile. He spun his thin silver blade with lazy grace, like it was part of his arm. Cale's sword was heavier, human-made, plain, and dented, but he held it steady. "Begin," said a voice from above. Phaler moved first, fast and light, like a breeze through trees. His blade flashed in the sun. Cale dodged, just barely, feeling the rush of air against his cheek. The crowd laughed softly. Cale didn't smile. He stepped back, let Phaler come at him again, same strike, same rhythm. This time, Cale caught the blade with his own and twisted. Not elegant, not pretty, but it worked. Phaler stumbled. Gasps echoed through the courtyard. Cale moved fast. He slammed his elbow into Phaler's ribs, then swept his leg out from under him. The elf hit the ground hard, dust rising around him. His sword clattered away. Silence. Then the sharp sound of someone clapping. Slow, deliberate. High Lady Saralith stood on the balcony, her eyes like ice. She was Cale's guardian or owner, depending on who you asked. She raised one elegant hand, and the guards stepped in to separate the fighters. "Well done," she said, her voice smooth but sharp. "Our little human is learning tricks." Cale said nothing. He bowed low as he had been taught. Inside, though, his thoughts were fire. They all watched him like he was a toy. A clever animal doing tricks. But he remembered the slums where humans lived, thin, dirty, afraid. He remembered his mother's hands, worn and shaking. The elves took her when he was 6. He never saw her again. They gave him books. They taught him language, swordplay, even magic theory, just to see if a human could learn. Like a game. But he learned more than they knew. Later that night, Cale sat alone in his chamber, a small room with silk curtains and golden candles. He held a piece of old parchment in his hand. He had stolen it from the palace library, a fragment of a map. One word was clear: Dern. He didn't know where it led, not yet, but something in his bones said it mattered. They thought he was tame, that he was theirs. Cale looked at his reflection in the candle's flame. His face was human, plain, scared, stubborn. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Let them laugh. For now. The cold wind whipped through the trees as Cale stood at the edge of the clearing. The human camp behind him was alive with quiet preparation. Men sharpening swords, women tying packs, children watching with wide eyes. Tonight, they would take a chance. The last chance. Cale's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, but it was not the sword that made his heart pound, it was the plan. A gamble to break the Elves' power and bring freedom to his people. The Elves had sent illusions, visions of betrayal, whispers that seeded doubt. Even some humans had begun to question Cale's leadership. But Cale had trusted Lyrae, and she had remained by his side, proving her loyalty every day. We hit the glass towers, Cale told his closest warriors. Destroy their magic source, cut off their control. Renna's eyes flashed. It's risky. We'll face their best guards. Cale nodded. We have no choice. If we don't act now, the Elves will crush us from the inside. They moved like ghosts through the forest, silent and quick. The moon hid behind clouds, and the night seemed to hold its breath. As they neared Loventhal, Cale felt the power of the heart of Dern burning bright within him. It pulsed like a drum, steady and strong. The crystal's magic had changed him, not made him a god, but a man who could lead. When they reached the city walls, Lyrae stepped forward. She whispered an ancient Elven word, and the guards nearby froze, caught in a gentle sleep. The spell was subtle, not strong enough to harm, but enough to open the way. Inside the glass towers, Cale saw the heart of Elven power. A glowing crystal similar to his own, surrounded by twisting vines of magic. The source of their illusions, their control. Cale raised his sword. For the humans, he struck the crystal. A burst of light exploded and the tower trembled. Magic shattered like glass, falling in sparks around them. Outside, chaos erupted. The Elves' control broke. Their illusions faded. The humans cheered, rallying as one. But the battle was not over. Serelith appeared, her eyes blazing with fury and fear. She raised her hands, gathering what power remained. Cale met her gaze. It's over, Serelith. Your time is done. The two clashed, magic against magic, sword against spell. The ground shook beneath them. Cale felt the heart of Dern flare inside him. He pushed forward, not just with strength, but with the courage of all the humans who had suffered under Elven rule. With a final strike, Serelith's magic broke. She fell to her knees defeated. The war was won. Cale stood tall, breathing hard, the fires of freedom lighting the sky. This was the last gambit, and it had paid off. The wind howled across the jagged cliffs as Cale pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders. Snow clung to his boots and ice bit at his face, but he didn't stop. Each step took him farther from the Elven lands and closer to the truth. Behind him, the tall white towers of Loventhal were just a memory. Ahead, dark forests and broken hills stretched into the wild. No guards, no orders, no chains. He was finally free. But he was also hunted. Elven scouts had been chasing him for days. He had seen their shadows at night, heard the quiet whistles between them. They wanted to catch him before you reach what the old map had called the Shattered North. That's where the humans still lived free, if the stories were true. After 2 weeks of walking, Cale found them. It happened at dusk. He crossed a narrow path between cliffs where snow had turned to mud. The moment he stepped onto it, the ground gave way. A rope snared his leg, pulling him upside down. He shouted, struggling, as shapes moved from the trees. They weren't elves. They were humans, rough, scarred, and dressed in furs. One had a bow aimed at Cale's chest. Another held a long axe. Elf Pet, the tallest one, growled. His beard was gray, and a long scar crossed his cheek. What are you doing here? I'm not one of them, Cale said quickly. Not anymore. The tall man studied him. Then prove it. They cut him down and dragged him to a camp deep in the woods. It was nothing like the elf cities. Smoke filled the air. Children ran barefoot in the mud, but the people looked strong, alive, free. Cale met with their leader, a woman named Renna. She had sharp eyes and wore a necklace of wolf teeth. You say you're one of us, she said, but you smell like elf perfume. Cale handed her the map, showed her the book, told her about the heart of Dern. Brenna listened in silence, then she laughed. You think an old rock will save us? I don't know, Cale said. But the elves fear it, and I think that means it's more than a story. Brenna looked at him for a long time. If you want our help, you'll earn it, she said. Tomorrow you fight one of ours. Win and we'll listen. Lose and we send you back to your masters. Cale nodded. Deal. That night he sat by the fire, sharpening his sword. His muscles ached, but his mind was clear. He wasn't the same boy raised in silken halls. Not anymore. These people were hard like iron, and if he wanted their respect, he had to show them. So was he. The tall towers of Levanthil shimmered like glass in the bright morning sun. From far away, the city looked perfect, beautiful, calm, and untouched by time. But inside, the air was thick with worry. High Lady Seralith stood at her throne, a throne made of shining crystal and twisted silver. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with cold fury. The news of the humans' attacks had reached her hours ago. Supplies lost. Patrols vanished. A growing rebellion. This is no small trouble, she said, her voice sharp. The humans are rising. The Council of Elves murmured, but Seralith raised a hand. We cannot fight them with swords alone. They hide in the forests and strike like shadows. A young elf stepped forward. My lady, they have no real power. Our magic is greater. We can crush them with a wave of our hands. Seralith shook her head slowly. We have grown proud and blind. They learn faster than we think. Their leader, the human who wields the heart of Dern, has changed the game. She looked toward the windows, where the forests stretched far and wild. It is time for a new plan. That night, Seralith called her best commanders to the glass throne room. The floor was smooth and cold beneath their feet. On a table in the center lay a map of the lands, marked with the places humans now controlled. We will use their cleverness against them, she said. Trick their minds and break their will. One commander, a sharp-eyed elf named Verendor, smiled. Illusions. Spells that twist reality. We can make them doubt everything. Seralith nodded. Yes, and more. We will send spies disguised as humans. We will spread lies and fear. The plan was dark and clever. The elves would become shadows themselves, hidden in plain sight, turning the humans against each other. Meanwhile, in the human camp, Cale felt a strange chill as the moon rose. Larry returned from a secret meeting with elves inside the city. They're preparing tricks, she whispered. Illusions to confuse us. Lies to turn our people against me. Cale frowned. Then we must be stronger. The heart of Dern showed me one thing. Our greatest power is trust. He looked at his friends, Brenna, Lyrae, and the others. We will stand together. No magic can break what we build. The night grew deeper. Around them, fires crackled and the sounds of a growing army filled the air. Far away, in her glass throne room, Seralith smiled coldly. The war is no longer just swords and shields, she said softly. It is a battle for minds and souls. And both sides knew the fight was far from over.